Today's game features Alexander Vladimirovich Dukhov playing as white against Mikhail Tal as black. Move 1. White advances to d4. It's black's turn. Pawn moves to d6. White advances the pawn to c4. Black advances the pawn to e5. On move 5, white pawn takes pawn. Continuing, black pawn takes pawn. Now, white queen snaps off the queen, giving check. Black now plays king removes the queen. The idea is to develop quickly. White completes minor piece development. Black continues with maneuvers the knight to a6. White plants the bishop on g5. Check. Black pushes to f6, equal chances for both sides. White secures the king with long castling. Checking the exposed king, interestingly, steps the king to e8, preventing counterplay. We're at move 15. White repositions the bishop. Black bishop slides to e6. At this point, pawn moves to e3. And here, knight to h6. White brings out the knight to f3. Black knight to f7. White continues with rook invades on g1. Black brings the knight to d6, this improves the position significantly. White pawn moves to b3, improving the worst piece. Black places the knight on c5. On move 25, white steps the king to b2. At this point, black pushes the pawn to c6. White advances the pawn to g4. Black pushes forward to a5. It's white's turn. Develops the bishop to e1. Black now plays improves the bishop's scope, provoking weaknesses. White advances the pawn. Black king walks to f7. And here, repositions the bishop for better activity, creating tactical complications. Black brings the rook to d8. On move 35, white advances to h4. Black advances the pawn to a4. White pawn moves to h5. Gaining compensation. Black places the knight on e4. Not the best move. White advances to g6, putting the king in check. Black pawn captures pawn. At this point, white takes the pawn with the pawn, and check. Black brings the king forward. White plays knight takes knight. Moving forward, black knight takes knight on e4. On move 45, white maneuvers the knight to d2. And here, black places the knight on c5, coordinating king and pawns. White brings the knight closer to the action. An error in judgment. Black rook takes the rook, the endgame idea is clear. White bishop captures rook, gaining an advantage. Black knight to d3. Giving check. Converting the advantage. It's white's turn. King to a1. Black pawn captures pawn. Continuing, bishop captures pawn. Black continues with pawn moves to b5. On move 55, white maneuvers the knight to d2. Interestingly, bishop slides to b4. White activates the knight, a dubious move. Black pawn captures the pawn on c4. It's white's turn. Places the bishop on c2. Black takes the bishop with the knight. White knight removes the knight. Black cuts off the enemy king with the rook. Alexander Vladimirovich Dukhov resigns. Mikhail Tal wins the game.